young man growing up without a father in your life? This one's for you. Maybe he walked away. Maybe he was taken too soon. Maybe he's distant, physically or emotionally. Maybe he's drowning in his own struggles. Or maybe you've never met him at all. But here's what you need to know. Your story isn't written by his absence. It's being written right now by you. The challenges you face without a father are real, but don't let them define your future. Instead, use them to build strength, resilience, and character. In this video, we are going to go through 25 mind traps that might be holding you back. The kind of wisdom a father might have shared, but now you'll learn it here. So if you are ready, let's get started. Have you ever told yourself, I'm going to do better, but then just end up doing the same thing that you told yourself you weren't going to do? Maybe you say, right, that's the last time I'm going to get drunk on a night out, but the very next weekend you get drunk again. Or you tell yourself that you are going to stop hanging out with the wrong crowd, and then a phone call later, you are meeting up with them again. That uncomfortable feeling you're getting, that's a mind trap called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance happens when your actions don't match what you believe or say. It creates a feeling of stress or guilt because deep down, you know you're not being the person you want to be. If you are growing up without a father in your life for whatever reason, you might feel like you have to figure out life on your own. You might have goals, like to someday be a great father or run a successful business. But without guidance, it's easy to fall into habits that pull you in the opposite direction. That tension between who you want to be and what you're actually doing can feel heavy. Let's say, for example, that you want to be seen as reliable, someone others can count on, but then you skip practice or show up late to work. You feel bad about it because it doesn't match who you want to be. Or maybe you want to be healthy and fit, but every night you're staying up late and eating junk food. That inner conflict, that's cognitive dissonance. The good news is there are 3 easy ways to resolve it. The first one is to get clear on your values. Ask yourself, who do I want to be? Write down 3 traits or goals, like being disciplined, trustworthy, or hardworking. The second one is to take small steps. Start with one action that matches your goal. If you want to be disciplined, try waking up at the same time every day. Small actions build momentum. And the third one is to own your choices. If your actions don't align with your values, don't beat yourself up. Just recognize it and decide to do better next time. Remember, no one is perfect and everyone struggles with this. But the ones who succeed are the ones who face that inner conflict and use it as a guide to make better choices. You don't have to be stuck in this trap. You can break free, but it is up to you. If this is a mind trap that is affecting you, here's what you do. Pick one thing you want to improve. Maybe it's showing up on time, eating better, or being more focused. Write it down and decide on one small action to do today that matches that goal. Do this first thing in the morning, and by the end of the day, check in with yourself. How did you go? If you failed, just try again tomorrow. If you succeeded, then you took a step in the right direction. Now all you have to do is keep going. It is as simple as that. Have you ever felt like everyone's watching you, judging your every move, every mistake, like you're on stage and the world's paying close attention? That feeling, my friend, is called the spotlight effect, and it might be holding you back in ways you don't even realize. Imagine this. What if I told you most of the time, nobody's actually watching, and that spotlight you feel is really just in your head? Stick around, and I'll show you how to turn it off for good. So what is the spotlight effect? It's when you think people notice you way more than they actually do. It's that voice in your head saying, they're all judging me, when in reality, most people are too caught up in their own lives to even notice. It's called the spotlight effect because it feels like someone's shining a bright light on you. But here's the truth. Most of the time, that light barely exists. If you have an absent father, you might feel extra pressure to prove yourself. You might worry more about making mistakes or think everyone's judging you for not having a dad. That constant fear of being judged can stop you from taking risks or building confidence. It's like carrying a weight on your shoulders. Unnecessary, but really hard to put down. Here's a real-life scenario. Imagine you're at school or at work and you trip in the hallway. You immediately think, everyone's laughing at me. But the truth is that most people are too busy thinking about their own lives to even notice. And if someone did notice, what exactly are they going to do with that information? Will it matter tomorrow, next week, or ever? Probably not. If you are scared to stand up and speak in front of people, that's the spotlight effect holding you back, convincing you that everyone's judging you, when most of the time, they're paying little attention, or just listening. Here are 3 simple steps on how to overcome the spotlight effect. Firstly, you need to shift your perspective. Ask yourself, what am I really worried about? Most people are so focused on their own spotlight that they barely notice you. Remind yourself of that. Secondly, focus on what matters. Think about the bigger picture. Will this thing you're stressing over really matter a week from now? Probably not. And thirdly, practice being present. When you feel self-conscious, take a deep breath and focus on the moment. Think about what you're doing, not what others might be thinking. Here's the truth. You can control how bright that spotlight is. Most of the time, it's barely even on you. Don't let imaginary judgment stop you from becoming the man you want to be. Focus on your goals and your growth, not on what others might or might not be thinking. I have a challenge for you. Do something small that makes you nervous. It could be answering a question in front of people in a formal setting, starting a conversation with someone totally new, or trying something completely outside your comfort zone. Afterward, ask yourself, who really noticed? Who cared? Write it down and you'll probably find most people didn't even react. And when you realize that, you'll start to feel more confident. Now let's move on. Have you ever made a choice, like buying something or saying yes to the first opportunity, and later thought, I didn't really think that through? Maybe you grabbed the first pair of shoes you saw, only to realize later there were better options. Your actions are not just holding you back, they are influencing your daily decisions. That feeling? That's not bad luck. It's a mind trap called the anchoring effect. Let's fix that. The anchoring effect is when your mind locks on to the first piece of information you see, and it influences your decisions, even if it's not the best choice. Think of it like this. That first piece of information acts like an anchor, keeping you stuck instead of letting you explore better options. You probably don't have someone to challenge your first impressions or guide you to dig deeper before making decisions. That can lead you to settle for what's easy or what's right in front of you, instead of what's actually best for you. Why does this matter? It matters because the anchoring effect can show up in every part of your life: relationships, career choices, friendships, and even how you see yourself. Let me break it down for you with an example. Imagine you're applying for a job. The first offer you get is $15 an hour, and you think, that's decent. You don't negotiate or even look at other options because that first number is stuck in your head. Or maybe someone calls you lazy once, and suddenly that label becomes your reality, even though you're capable of so much more. That's the anchoring effect, and it locks you into thinking small. Here's how you can break free. From now on, pause and question the first thing. When you hear or see something for the first time, ask yourself, is this really the best option? What else could be true? Next, look for alternatives. Before deciding, compare at least 2 other options. Whether it's a job, a big decision, or even how you view yourself, don't settle for the first thing you hear. And finally, challenge negative anchors. If someone has labeled you like lazy or not good enough, ask yourself, is this really who I am? Or is this just an anchor I've been stuck to? The answer is almost always no. The anchoring effect can make you feel stuck, but you're not tied to that first idea or impression. You have the power to challenge those anchors, explore your options, and aim higher. Never settle for less than you're capable of. The next time you need to make a decision, big or small, pause and write down 2 other options. Whether it's what to eat, what to wear, or how to spend your time, give yourself choices. At the end of the week, look back and see how often exploring options led you to better decisions. You'll realize just how much freedom you have when you stop letting anchors hold you back. Do you remember ever thinking someone was amazing just because they seemed cool or did one thing well? Maybe they looked confident, had a great car, or were good at sports. But later you realize they weren't as great as you thought. This is a mind trap that doesn't just affect how you see others, it affects how you see yourself too. And it is called the halo effect. The halo effect happens when you judge someone or something based on one positive quality, and it clouds your view of everything else about them. It's natural to search for role models or people to look up to, but sometimes that means putting people on a pedestal just because of one good trait, like confidence or success, without seeing the whole picture. This can stop you from recognizing the truth about others and even about yourself. Think about the guy at school who's great at sports, or the guy at work who is really confident. Everyone assumes they would also be a great leader, but maybe they are rude or selfish. Or picture someone driving a flashy car. You might think, wow, they must be successful, but they could be drowning in debt. The halo effect tricks you into making assumptions based on just one thing, instead of seeing the full story. So how can you see beyond the halo effect? Let's break it into 3 steps. Question first impressions. When you admire someone, ask yourself, what else do I know about them? Is there more to their story? Then separate traits from actions. Just because someone seems confident doesn't mean they're kind or trustworthy. Pay attention to how they treat others, not just how they look or act. Finally, apply it to yourself. If someone judges you unfairly based on how you look or one mistake you have made, remind yourself that you're more than just one thing. Don't let their halo define your worth. The halo effect can make you trust the wrong people or doubt yourself for the wrong reasons. But when you learn to see the full picture, you can make better choices about who to trust, who to follow, and who you want to become. Don't let one shiny thing blind you to the truth. Try this. Think about someone you admire and write down 3 reasons why. Then ask yourself, do I really know enough to believe this? Next, do the same for yourself. Write down 3 things that make you proud. This exercise will help you see both others and yourself more clearly. Now let's have a look at the gambler's fallacy. Are you the type of person that thinks, I've had so much bad luck lately, something good has to happen soon? Or I've failed so many times, I must be due for a win? I'm sorry to break it to you, but that's a mind trap called the gambler's fallacy. The gambler's fallacy is when you believe that past events somehow affect the odds of what happens next, even when they don't. It makes you think you're due for something to change just because it hasn't happened yet. When you don't have a father figure, it's easy to feel like life has dealt you a tough hand. You might think, I've had so many struggles, success must be just around the corner, without realizing that success only comes with effort, not by chance. This mindset can make you wait for things to get better instead of taking action to make them better. Say you've been trying out for the basketball team every year and not making it. You think, this year I'll get in just because I've failed so many times before. But the truth is, it's not about how many times you've tried. It's about how much work you're putting in to improve. Or maybe you've been unlucky in relationships and you start thinking, the next person I meet has to be the one. That mindset can lead to disappointment because the past doesn't change the future unless you change your approach. You can fix this problem quite easily by doing the following things. Focus on the process, not luck. Ask yourself, what can I do right now to improve my odds? Success isn't random, it's earned through effort. Then recognize patterns you can control. Instead of waiting for things to change, look at what you can adjust. Are you practicing enough? Are you putting yourself in the right situations to succeed? And stay patient but proactive. Good things take time, but they also take consistent action. Don't let past failures trick you into expecting success without effort. Life isn't a casino, and your success isn't decided by luck. It's decided by the work you put in every day. Don't wait for a win. Make it happen. Pick one area of your life where you've been waiting for luck, like getting better grades, making a team, hoping that girl notices you, or building a new skill. Now write down 3 specific actions you can take to improve your chances, and then do one of them to see what happens. After a couple of weeks, reflect on how much closer you feel to your goal. I guarantee that taking action will feel better than waiting for luck. Have you ever been super impressed by someone just because they seem better than the person right before them? Or maybe you felt worse about yourself because you were compared to someone else who seemed to have it all together. That mind trap is called the contrast effect. The contrast effect happens when you judge something, not on its own, but based on how it compares to something else. It can mess with your ability to see things clearly and make fair decisions. You might compare yourself to guys, and because you don't have a father figure in your life, think, I'll never be as good as them. Or maybe you look at your situation and compare it to someone else's, feeling like you're way behind. This constant comparing can hold you back from focusing on your own growth. Say you're at the gym and someone lifting huge weights makes you feel weak, even though you're lifting more than you did last week. That's the contrast effect, making you focus on someone else's success instead of your own progress. Or maybe you're trying to save money and someone you know buys a flashy car. Suddenly you feel like you're falling behind, even though you're building real stability. If you want to overcome the contrast effect, try doing this. Compare yourself to your past, not others. Instead of looking at what others have or do, ask yourself, am I better today than I was yesterday? That's the only comparison that matters. Then focus on your own goals. Remind yourself of what you're working toward. What someone else is doing doesn't change your path unless you let it. And finally, reframe your perspective. When you see someone doing better, don't let it discourage you. Let it inspire you. Use it as proof that progress is possible. The contrast effect can make you feel small or stuck, but you don't have to let it. Your journey is yours, and it's not defined by where anyone else is. Focus on growing at your own pace, and you'll build the confidence to win on your own terms. Do this. Write down one area where you've been comparing yourself to someone else, like fitness, grades, or confidence. Then write 3 ways you've improved in that area compared to a month ago. Every time you start comparing yourself to someone else, read that list and remind yourself of how far you've come. It is the only way to focus on your progress and build genuine self-confidence. Have you ever thought something about yourself, like I'm not good enough, and then noticed every little thing that seemed to prove you right? Or maybe you believed someone wasn't trustworthy, so you focused only on the stuff that made them seem shady? That's a mind trap called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when you only notice things that support what you already believe and ignore everything else, even if it's not the full truth. At times, you might feel like you're at a disadvantage. That belief can make you focus on every struggle or failure as proof that you're less than, while ignoring all the things you're doing right. This trap can keep you stuck in negative thinking and stop you from seeing your true potential. Let's say you've struggled in school, so you start telling yourself, I'm just not smart. Then every bad grade feels like proof of that belief, even though you've also done well in some subjects. Or maybe you think someone doesn't like you, so you notice every little thing they do that seems rude, while ignoring the times they were actually nice to you. How do you resolve it? Well, the first thing you need to do is challenge your beliefs. Ask yourself, is this really true, or am I just focusing on the stuff that fits my story? Look for evidence that proves the opposite of what you think. Next, keep an open mind. Before jumping to conclusions, remind yourself that there's always more to the story. Give yourself and others a fair chance. And finally, reframe negative thoughts. If you catch yourself thinking, I'm not good at this, add the word yet. Say, I'm not good at this yet. Confirmation bias is not the truth. It's just a lens. When you take off that lens and start looking for the good, you'll see how much you're capable of and how much is possible for you. Find some time this week to write down one negative belief you have about yourself, like I'm not confident or I always fail. Then find at least 3 examples from your life that prove the opposite. Every time that negative thought pops up, remind yourself of those examples. If you can get into a habit of doing this, you will change the way you see people and things. Have you ever learned about something new, like a type of car, a song, or even an idea, and suddenly you start seeing it everywhere? It's like it never existed before, and now it is everywhere. That's a mind trap called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon happens when you notice something for the first time, and then it feels like it's everywhere. In reality, it's not more common. You're just paying more attention to it now. Going through life without a father figure might have made you hyper-aware of what's missing in your life. Once you start thinking about what you don't have, whether it's guidance, support, or a role model, you start seeing proof of it everywhere. This can make you feel like you're at a disadvantage, even when you have other strengths and opportunities. Let's say you're scrolling through your socials and you see a post about someone's dad teaching them how to fix a car. Suddenly, every time you're scrolling, it feels like everyone has a dad doing something amazing for them. Or maybe you start thinking about how much you failed at something, and now it feels like failure is all you can see in your life. This is how to escape the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. First, you need to recognize the phenomenon. Tell yourself that just because you're noticing something more doesn't mean it's happening more. It's just your brain filtering for what it thinks is important. Next, shift your focus. Instead of looking for what's missing or going wrong, start looking for what's going right. For example, notice the moments where you've solved a problem or learned something new. And finally, take control of the narrative. If you catch yourself feeling like everyone else has it better, ask yourself, what do I have that's unique to me? Focus on what you can control and what you can build for yourself. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon can trick you into seeing only the negatives, but you have the power to retrain your mind to focus on the positives. Don't let what you notice control you. Choose what you pay attention to, and you'll start seeing opportunities instead of obstacles. You can start practicing this straight away. Every time you catch yourself focusing on something negative, like what you don't have or what's going wrong, stop and write down one thing that's going right for you. Before you know it, you will have a list that you can look back on and remind yourself that there's more to your life than the negatives you first noticed. You know when you leave something unfinished, like a project or a task around the house, and then you just can't stop thinking about it? Even when you're doing something else, it just keeps popping back into your mind? That's a mind trap called the Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect is when your brain can't let go of unfinished tasks or goals. It keeps them at the forefront of your mind until you finish them, which can cause stress or distraction if you have a lot of things left undone. If you are like me, I always feel like there's always more I need to do or fix, whether it's trying to figure out how to be successful on your own or repairing a relationship. Those unfinished things in your life can leave you feeling stressed and distracted, preventing you from focusing on the present moment or moving forward. Let's take, for example, when you have a piece of work that you keep putting off. The longer you leave it, the more it weighs on your mind. Even when you're trying to relax or do something else. Or maybe there's a dream you've been putting on hold, like learning a new skill or starting a business, and it feels like it's always in the back of your mind, distracting you from what you're doing now. The question is, how do you overcome the Zeigarnik effect? Well, the first thing you need to do is break tasks into smaller steps. Instead of thinking about the whole thing, break it down into smaller, more manageable tasks. If you're avoiding a big project, start with just the first step, like writing an outline. You'll feel less stressed and it will be easier to finish. Next, you have to make sure you set clear deadlines. If you have something unfinished, set a small deadline for yourself. By deciding when you'll finish, you give your brain closure and reduce the mental clutter. And finally, focus on progress, not perfection. Instead of stressing about everything you haven't done yet, focus on how far you've come. Every small step you take brings you closer to finishing what you started. The Zeigarnik effect doesn't have to control you. You have the power to take small actions, complete tasks, and clear your mind. Remember, it's not about getting everything perfect. It's about progress and moving forward. As an exercise, why don't you pick one task or goal that's been weighing on your mind and break it into 3 smaller steps? Then commit to completing one of those steps on your calendar. When you finish, take a moment to reflect on how much lighter your mind feels and how much closer you are to finishing it all. Now let's talk about the paradox of choice. You know when you have a seemingly simple choice to make, like what to eat or which shirt to wear, and feel completely overwhelmed because there are too many options? You spend forever deciding, and by the end, you're either stressed or second-guessing yourself. This particular mind trap is called the paradox of choice. The paradox of choice happens when having too many options makes it harder to decide, leaving you feeling anxious, unsure, or even regretful after you finally pick something. If you haven't had a father figure in your life, you might feel like you're making every decision on your own, and life throws endless options at you. What to study, what to wear, how to act, who to trust. It can feel overwhelming, and sometimes you end up stuck, avoiding decisions altogether, or feeling like you made the wrong choice no matter what. Have you ever scrolled through Netflix for 20 minutes trying to pick a movie? And the more you scroll, the harder it gets because you're worried about picking the wrong one. Or maybe you're trying to decide what career path to take, and all the options feel equally impossible to choose from. Too many choices can make it feel like no choice is good enough. Try doing the following. Set clear priorities. Before you make a decision, ask yourself, what matters most? If you're choosing a career, is it about money, passion, or flexibility? Knowing what you value makes the options easier to sort through. Then, limit your options. If you're overwhelmed by choices, narrow it down to 2 or 3 options. It's easier to pick between a few solid choices than to weigh up every single one. And most importantly, accept imperfection. No choice is ever going to be perfect, and that's okay. What matters is making a decision, learning from it, and adjusting if you need to. Don't let this mind trap hold you back. The most successful people aren't the ones who make perfect choices. They're the ones who make a decision and move forward with confidence. You have the power to choose and grow. At some point this week, pick one decision you've been putting off making, big or small. Write down the top 2 or 3 options, and next to each one, write one reason it matches what you care about most. Then by the end of the day, choose one option and stick with it. You will see how freeing it feels to be able to decide on something and move forward. You know when you look at an athlete, a celebrity, or an entrepreneur and think, if they can do it, I should be able to do it too. But then, when you try and struggle, it feels like something must be wrong with you. That's a mind trap called survivorship bias. Survivorship bias happens when you only focus on the success stories and ignore the ones that didn't make it, giving you a distorted view of what it takes to succeed. When you don't have someone to guide you, you might look to role models or success stories for inspiration, but sometimes those stories make it seem like success is easy or guaranteed if you just work hard enough or follow the same steps. What you don't see are all the people who tried the same thing and didn't make it. This can leave you feeling like a failure. Let's look at the classic case of a YouTuber who dropped out of school and became rich. It's easy to think, if they did it, I can too. But what you don't see are the thousands of people who also dropped out and struggled to make ends meet. Or maybe you admire a pro athlete who trains hard and makes it look easy. What you don't see are the countless others who trained just as hard but didn't get the break they needed. So how do you see beyond survivorship bias? Look at the full picture. When you hear a success story, ask yourself, what challenges did they face? What did they have that I might not? Success isn't just about hard work. It's about circumstances, timing, and sometimes even luck. Learn from failures. Find stories of people who didn't make it and figure out why. These lessons are just as important as the success stories. They teach you what to watch out for. And finally, focus on your own path. Instead of copying someone else's journey, build your own. Ask yourself, what are my strengths? What's my version of success? There's no one-size-fits-all formula. Survivorship bias can make you feel like you're falling short, but success isn't a straight path. It's messy, full of learning, and unique to you. Don't compare your journey to someone else's highlight reel. Focus on doing the work and growing every day. This week, think about one success story you admire, like an athlete, a YouTuber, or an entertainer. Research what challenges they faced and what support they had. Then write down 3 things you can apply to your own journey and 1 challenge you're prepared to overcome. Understanding the full picture gives you a more realistic and empowering perspective. Now be honest. Are you the type of person that blames someone else when things didn't go your way, but takes full credit when something goes right? Like saying, that teacher just hates me when you fail a test, but then think, I'm a genius when you ace another? That's a mind trap called self-serving bias. Self-serving bias is when you give yourself credit for successes, but blame other people or outside circumstances for failures. It can make it harder to see the truth and grow from your mistakes. If you don't have a father around, you might feel like you have to prove yourself all the time. That pressure can make it tempting to protect your ego by avoiding responsibility for any mistakes you make. It's easier to say, it's not my fault, than to admit where you could improve. But that mindset can hold you back from becoming the best version of yourself. If you bomb a job interview instead of thinking, they just didn't like me, ask yourself if you were really prepared or if you were even right for the role. Or maybe you win a game and think, it's all because of me, without acknowledging the help from your team. This is how to resolve it. Take ownership of your actions. When something goes wrong, instead of blaming others, ask yourself, what could I have done differently? Growth starts when you own your part. Then recognize support and success. When you succeed, don't forget the people or circumstances that helped you. Gratitude keeps you grounded and reminds you that no one wins alone. And finally, balance the story. Write down both the internal, what you did, and external, what helped or hindered factors behind any outcome. Seeing the full picture helps you learn and grow. Self-serving bias can make you feel good in the moment, but real strength comes from facing the truth. When you own your mistakes and share your success, you become unstoppable. The man you want to be isn't afraid to tell the truth, learn and grow. Why don't you try this as an experiment? Think of 1 failure and 1 success you've had recently. Write down 3 things you did that contributed to each outcome and 3 outside factors that played a role. Now reflect on how this full picture can help you improve in the future. How many times have you seen someone mess up and thought, that's just who they are? But when you mess up, you think, it's because I had a bad day. For example, calling someone lazy for being late, but blaming traffic when it happens to you. This mind trap is called the fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error happens when you judge other people's mistakes as part of who they are, but explain your own mistakes as being caused by outside circumstances. It can lead to unfair assumptions and hurt your relationships. If you haven't had someone to guide you through life, you may have become quick to judge others harshly, thinking they don't care or they're just lazy, because you've had to rely on yourself. But this mindset can block you from building strong relationships and seeing the bigger picture. Say a coworker doesn't finish a group project, so you think they're unreliable. But when you miss a deadline, you tell yourself, I was just too busy. Or maybe someone snaps at you and you assume they're rude, but when you're short with someone, you know it's because you're stressed. This error makes it harder to understand others and harder for them to understand you. If you want to break free from this mindset, this is what you do. Pause before judging. When someone messes up, ask yourself, could there be a reason for their behavior? Just like you'd want someone to give you the benefit of the doubt, try doing the same for them. Try and see the bigger picture. Remind yourself that everyone is dealing with challenges you can't see. A missed deadline or bad mood might be a sign of something deeper, not just who they are. And above all, practice empathy. Instead of jumping to conclusions, ask questions like, "Are you okay?" or "What's going on?" Understanding their perspective helps you build trust and stronger relationships. The fundamental attribution error can keep you stuck in judgment, but real growth comes when you choose understanding over assumptions. A strong man knows that everyone has a story, and choosing empathy doesn't just help others. It helps you grow into the person you're meant to be. Try and think of one person you've judged recently, like a classmate, friend, or coworker, and ask yourself, what might be going on in their life that I don't see? Then the next time they do something that frustrates you, practice asking them a question instead of making an assumption. You will quickly see how understanding changes your perspective. You know when you look back at a situation and think, I knew that was going to happen, even though at the time you weren't sure at all. Like after a test, thinking, I knew I should have studied that one chapter, even though you didn't touch it. That's a mind trap called hindsight bias. Hindsight bias is when, after something happens, you believe you always knew it was going to turn out that way, even though you didn't. It tricks you into thinking the past was more predictable than it really was. If you have been figuring life out by yourself, it's easy to look back at tough situations and blame yourself for not knowing better. Hindsight bias can make you feel like your mistakes were obvious, even when they weren't. This can lead to unnecessary guilt and stop you from taking risks in the future. For example, you might fail at something like a new business and think, I knew I should have researched more, even though you had no way of knowing how hard the competition would be. Or maybe you trust someone who later lets you down, and you tell yourself, I should have seen the red flags, when in reality they weren't obvious at the time. If you want to recognize and avoid hindsight bias, do the following. Acknowledge uncertainty. Remind yourself that life isn't predictable. At the time, you made the best decision you could with the information you had. Learn without blaming yourself. Instead of saying, I should have known, ask, what can I learn from this? Use the experience to grow rather than beat yourself up, and focus on the present and future. You can't change the past, but you can prepare for the future. Take what you've learned and use it to make better decisions moving forward. Hindsight bias can trick you into thinking you failed, but failure is just another way to learn. You're not supposed to know everything right away. Real growth comes when you accept your past, learn from it, and use it to shape your future. This week, think of one mistake you've been beating yourself up over. Write down what you knew at the time versus what you know now. Then write one lesson you can take from it to help you in the future. Focus on the progress you're making instead of the regret. Have you ever made a snap decision based on the first thing that popped into your head, only to realize later that you didn't have the full picture? Maybe you avoided something because of one bad review, or assumed everyone else has their life together just because of what they post online. That's a classic mind trap called availability bias. Availability bias happens when you rely too much on the information that's easiest to remember, like what you just saw, heard, or experienced, rather than looking at the bigger picture. When you don't have a father figure to help guide you and sort through information, you might make decisions based on what's most noticeable instead of what's most accurate. This can lead to avoiding good opportunities because of fear or overestimating how common success or failure really is. It is like seeing a news story about a plane crash and thinking flying is dangerous, even though it's actually one of the safest ways to travel. Or maybe you're scrolling through Instagram, seeing people who seem to be crushing it in life and think you're falling behind, when in reality, you're only seeing their highlights, not their struggles. There are 3 things you can do to overcome availability bias. Question what you notice first. Ask yourself, is this the whole story or just the part I'm paying attention to? Take a moment to dig deeper before deciding. Seek out the bigger picture. Instead of relying on one example, look for patterns or statistics. For example, if you're afraid of failure, find stories of people who struggled and succeeded later. Check your perspective. Remind yourself that what's easiest to remember isn't always the most accurate. Be willing to look beyond what's obvious. Availability bias can hold you back, but only if you let it. A strong man doesn't just accept the easiest answer. He questions, he digs deeper, and he seeks the truth. The moment you start seeing beyond what's right in front of you, you unlock the power to make smarter decisions, break past limitations, and build a future that's truly yours. This week, challenge one belief or fear that might be holding you back because of availability bias. Maybe it's, I'm not good enough, or I'll never succeed. Now flip the script. Write down 3 real examples that prove otherwise. If you feel like you're failing, list 3 times you've made progress, no matter how small. Seeing the whole picture changes everything. Give yourself credit where it's due. You're doing better than you think. Ever heard something so many times that you just accepted it as the truth without ever questioning it? Maybe it's you have to be lucky to succeed, or people like you can't achieve that. The more you hear it, the more it feels like a fact, even if it's not. That's a mind trap called the availability cascade, where repetition alone makes something feel true, even when it isn't. But here's the real question. What if everything you've been told is wrong? The availability cascade happens when an idea spreads and feels true simply because it's repeated often, not because it's based on real evidence. It tricks you into believing what's popular instead of what's accurate. When there's no father figure to challenge the ideas you hear, it's easy to accept whatever's repeated as fact. You start believing things like, you'll always be stuck where you are, or success is only for people with connections. But just because you've heard it over and over doesn't make it true. These limiting beliefs aren't reality. They're just mind traps designed to hold you back. The real question is, are you going to let them? Have you heard people say, you have to go to college to be successful? Hearing it over and over might make you think it's the only path, even though there are many other ways to succeed. It's just a mindset that's been repeated so much it feels true. From now on, do this to break free from this particular mind trap. Question popular beliefs. Ask yourself, is this actually true, or is it just something people keep saying? Look for evidence to back it up or disprove it. Think for yourself. Just because everyone believes something doesn't mean it's right for you. Focus on what aligns with your goals and values, not what's trendy. Replace limiting beliefs. When you catch yourself repeating a negative idea, challenge it. For example, instead of saying, I'll never succeed, remind yourself, I can succeed if I put in the work. The availability cascade can box you into other people's beliefs, but you're not defined by the ideas you hear. You're defined by the choices you make. When you start questioning and thinking for yourself, you'll see that you're capable of much more than the world might say. This weekend, write down one belief you've heard repeated often, like, you can't succeed in this situation, or you have to follow a certain path. Then find one example or fact that proves it wrong. Reflect on how this new perspective can help you take control of your own story from now on. Have you ever stuck with something, like a bad relationship, a boring video game, or a project you hate just because you've already put a lot of time, effort, or money into it? You think, I can't quit now. I've come too far. That's a mind trap called the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy happens when you keep investing in something that isn't working because you've already spent time, effort, or resources on it, even though walking away might be the better choice. If your dad wasn't there to show you when to cut your losses, you might feel like you have to stick things out even when they aren't working. Whether it's a bad friendship, a failed plan, or a goal that doesn't fit anymore, the sunk cost fallacy can trap you into thinking quitting equals failure, when sometimes quitting is the smartest move. Imagine you've been playing with a team all season, but you don't enjoy it and you're not growing as a player. You think, I've already played this long, so I can't quit now. Or maybe you've invested months in a side hustle that isn't paying off, but instead of rethinking your approach, you keep pushing just because you've already put in so much effort. Here's how to escape the sunk cost fallacy. Focus on future value, not past effort. Ask yourself, is this still worth my time and energy moving forward? Don't let what you've already spent decide what you'll do next. Reframe quitting. Quitting doesn't mean failure. It means making room for better opportunities. Sometimes walking away is a win if it helps you focus on what really matters. Cut your losses with confidence. Recognize that the time or effort you've already put in is gone. Focus on what you can gain by moving on instead of staying stuck. The sunk cost fallacy is a strong trap, but real strength, that's knowing when to walk away. Every second you spend holding on to something that isn't working is time stolen from building something better. The past doesn't owe you anything, but your future, that's still yours to shape. Let go, move forward, and make room for what actually deserves your energy. There will be something in your life that isn't working, like a friendship, habit, or project. Write down what you've already invested and why you're holding on. Then write one way letting go could open up better opportunities. Take one small step toward moving on and see how it feels to focus on your future instead of your past. Ever noticed how the way something is worded can completely change how you feel about it? Imagine someone asks, do you want to take a risk? Versus, do you want to take an opportunity? It's the same choice, but one feels dangerous while the other feels exciting. That's the framing effect. The framing effect happens when the way information is presented influences how you feel about it, even though the facts haven't changed. It can trick you into making decisions based on emotions instead of logic. Without a strong father figure to challenge your thinking, it's easy to fall into the trap of seeing things the way they're presented to you. A setback might feel like a failure instead of a lesson, or a challenge might seem like a risk instead of an opportunity. That's the framing effect at work, shaping your mindset before you even realize it. But here's the truth. You get to decide how to see your experiences. Imagine you're choosing between two jobs. One pays $15 an hour, the other pays $12 an hour, but includes training for a long-term career. If someone says you'll lose $3 per hour with the second job, it feels like a bad deal. But if they say you'll gain valuable skills that set you up for the future, suddenly it seems like an investment. The facts didn't change, only the way they were framed. Here's what you do. First, pause and reframe. When faced with a choice, ask yourself, is this being framed positively or negatively? Try flipping the frame. For example, instead of focusing on what you might lose, think about what you could gain. Next, look at the facts. Separate the emotion from the information. Ask yourself, what are the actual facts? What matters most to me? And finally, take control of the frame. Instead of letting others decide how things are presented to you, reframe situations in a way that empowers you. For example, see a challenge as an opportunity, not a threat. The framing effect can trick you into seeing limits where there are opportunities. But when you learn to control the frame, you take back your power. Think back to a decision you made or an opportunity you let slip away. How did you see it at the time? Was it framed as a loss? Now flip the script. What could you have gained? What lesson was hidden in that moment? Shift your perspective. The way you see things shapes the way you live. So why not see possibilities instead of limitations? Ever had a streak of bad grades or kept seeing the same number everywhere and thought, this has to mean something? Your brain starts connecting the dots, creating patterns that don't actually exist. It's a trick your mind plays, a mind trap called the clustering illusion. The clustering illusion is when your brain sees patterns in random events, making you think they're connected or meaningful when they're just coincidences. Just because things happen close together doesn't mean they're connected. When you're navigating life on your own, it's easy to look for signs, like believing a streak of bad luck means you're doomed, or that a few wins make you unstoppable. But that's just your brain searching for patterns that aren't really there. The clustering illusion can trick you into false confidence or unnecessary fear, clouding your judgment and keeping you from seeing things as they truly are. If you win 3 small bets in a row, you might think, I'm on a hot streak, and then bet big and lose big because you overestimated your luck. This illusion tricks you into seeing meaning where there isn't any. There are ways to make sure you don't get sucked in by this mind trap. First, step back and look at the bigger picture. Ask yourself, is this a real pattern, or am I focusing too much on a small part of the story? One moment or streak doesn't define your ability or future. Next, base decisions on facts, not patterns. Instead of relying on a winning streak or bad luck, focus on what's real, your preparation, skills, and actions. That's what actually makes a difference. And lastly, remind yourself of randomness. Life isn't always predictable. Just because something happens a few times doesn't mean it'll keep happening. Trust in your efforts, not in coincidences. The clustering illusion can shake your confidence or push you into risks you don't need to take, but only if you let it. True strength comes from seeing life for what it is, not just the patterns your mind wants to find. Learn from every experience. Focus on what you can control. Your future isn't written in random streaks of luck or failure. You are the one who defines it. This week, take a step back and look at a pattern you've noticed. Maybe a streak of wins, losses, or strange coincidences. Now ask yourself, is this based on real facts, or is your mind just connecting dots that aren't really there? Once you see it clearly, shift your focus. Choose one real action you can take to improve, because progress isn't about patterns, it's about what you do next. Have you ever worked hard toward a goal, feeling like nothing was changing, only to wake up one day and see a massive difference? Like hitting the gym for weeks without noticing progress, then suddenly realizing you're lifting way more or seeing real results? That's the power of exponential growth. Exponential growth is when small, consistent efforts build over time and eventually lead to huge results. At first, it feels like nothing is happening, but then the progress starts to snowball and everything changes. When you don't have someone pushing you through challenges, it's easy to feel discouraged when results don't come fast. Whether you're learning a skill, getting stronger, or working toward a goal, you might think, what's the point? But real progress isn't always instant. It's built through small, consistent efforts. Keep going, because exponential growth is what leads to lasting success. Let's say you decide to learn the guitar. At first, your fingers hurt and you can barely play a chord. But if you practice just 20 minutes a day, it might feel slow for weeks. Then suddenly you're playing full songs. Or think about saving money. Putting away a little each week feels pointless, but over months and years, it grows into something huge thanks to compound interest. Here are 3 ways to harnessing the power. Focus on consistency over perfection. Instead of trying to do everything at once, commit to small, consistent actions, like studying 30 minutes a day or practicing a skill for 10 minutes. Consistency beats intensity in the long run. Trust the process. Remember that results take time. Progress might feel invisible at first, but it's happening under the surface. Keep showing up, and the payoff will come. Track your growth. Keep a journal or chart to track your efforts. When you look back in a month or a year, you'll see how far you've come, even if it felt slow at first. Exponential growth proves that every small effort counts. Success isn't about overnight wins. It's about showing up day after day, even when progress feels invisible. Each step forward is building something bigger than you can see right now. Stay consistent, and one day you'll look back and realize just how far you've come. Pick one small habit or action you can commit to this week, like doing push-ups, reading 10 pages a day, or saving $5 each day. Write it down and stick to it for 7 days. At the end of the week, reflect on how you feel and imagine what that habit could achieve in a month, a year, or 5 years. Have you ever felt like a pro at something, whether it's driving, gaming, or mastering a topic, only to later realize you weren't quite as skilled as you thought? Or maybe you've watched someone act ridiculously confident about something they clearly weren't great at. That's the mind trap called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect happens when people with little experience or skill overestimate their abilities, while people with more knowledge or skill often underestimate themselves. It's about not knowing enough to realize how much you don't know. When you're navigating life on your own, it's natural to feel like you have to prove yourself. This can sometimes make you overconfident in areas where you don't have much experience, or, on the flip side, cause you to doubt yourself even when you're actually capable. The Dunning-Kruger effect can trap you in both ways, keeping you from truly learning, improving, and reaching your full potential. Imagine learning to drive, and after just a few lessons, you feel like you've mastered it and don't need any more practice. But then, the moment you hit real traffic, you realize just how much you don't know. That moment when confidence meets reality, that's the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. This is what you do. Stay humble and curious. Remind yourself that there's always more to learn. Even experts keep growing. Ask questions, seek feedback, and don't be afraid to admit what you don't know. Check your confidence against facts. When you feel confident about something, ask yourself, do I really know enough to be sure? Look for evidence to support or challenge your assumptions. And embrace growth over perfection. Instead of trying to be the best right away, focus on steady improvement. Being willing to learn from mistakes is a sign of strength, not weakness. The Dunning-Kruger effect can trap you in either false confidence or crippling self-doubt. But real growth happens when you stay curious and open to learning. You don't need to have all the answers right away. What matters is making progress, one step at a time. The smartest men aren't the ones who think they know it all, but the ones who never stop growing. When you get a chance, pick one area where you feel confident, like a skill, hobby, or subject. Research something new about it and see if there's more to learn. Then think of one area where you feel unsure. Take one small step to learn or practice more in that area. Now reflect on how it feels to grow in both confidence and knowledge. Have you ever had a day where everything was going great until one small thing went wrong and suddenly that's all you could think about? Maybe you got a compliment in the morning, but later one awkward moment kept replaying in your head, drowning out all the good. That's a mind trap called negativity bias. Negativity bias is when your brain focuses more on the bad things that happen than the good things. It's like a magnifying glass for problems, making them seem bigger than they are while ignoring your wins. When you don't have a father figure to lift you up, it's easy to get trapped in self-doubt. Your mistakes and struggles feel huge, while your progress fades into the background. Negativity bias tricks you into believing you're failing, even when you're actually growing and improving. The truth is, you're probably doing better than you give yourself credit for. You just have to shift your focus to see it. Let's say you're in a basketball game. You make 5 great shots from distance, but miss 1 easy shot from up close. Instead of celebrating the good plays, you keep replaying that missed shot in your head. Negativity bias makes the bad moments feel way more important than they actually are. To overcome negativity bias, just do the following. Balance the scale. For every negative thought, challenge yourself to think of at least 2 positive things that happen. This helps your brain see the whole picture instead of just the bad parts. Practice gratitude. Every night, write down 3 things you're grateful for, no matter how small. Gratitude helps your mind focus on the good stuff and celebrate your wins. When something goes right, take a moment to appreciate it. Don't let your brain skip over your successes. Recognize them and use them to fuel your confidence. Negativity bias can make it feel like you're always falling short, but life isn't about perfection. It's about progress. When you start paying attention to the good, you'll realize just how far you've come and how much more you're capable of. Growth isn't about avoiding setbacks. It's about learning from them without letting them define you. Keep moving forward, and you'll see just how strong you really are. Every time you catch yourself dwelling on something negative, pause and write down 2 positive things that happened that day. At the end of the week, read through your list and reflect on how much good is in your life, even when it feels overshadowed by the bad. Have you ever found yourself doing something just because everyone else was? Maybe you jumped on a trend without really thinking about it, bought those shoes just because everyone else had them, or nodded along in a conversation even when you didn't fully agree. It's easy to go with the flow, but that pull to follow the crowd, that's a mind trap called the bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect happens when you make decisions or believe something just because other people are doing it. It tricks you into thinking something is right or popular, even if it's not the best choice for you. It shapes your choices more than you realize. When you grow up without a father figure to guide you, it's easy to feel like you have to follow the crowd just to fit in or avoid standing out. Maybe you go along with trends, give in to peer pressure, or shape your opinions based on what's popular on social media. The bandwagon effect makes it tempting to follow the herd, but if you're always chasing what everyone else is doing, you're not making choices that truly reflect who you are or who you want to become. All your friends start vaping, and even though you know it's not good for you, you feel pressured to try it just to fit in. The bandwagon effect pushes you to follow the crowd instead of thinking for yourself and trusting your own judgment. Pause and ask why. Before jumping on the bandwagon, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Do I actually believe in it, or am I just following the crowd? This simple question can help you think more clearly. Trust your own values. Think about who you want to be and what matters to you. Use those values as a guide to make decisions instead of letting others decide for you. Be okay with standing out. It takes strength to go against the crowd, but standing up for what you believe in is what makes you a leader. It's okay to be different if it means staying true to yourself. The bandwagon effect can make it seem like you have to follow the crowd to fit in, but real strength comes from making your own choices. You don't need validation from others to succeed. Stand firm in what you believe, even if it means standing alone. The ones who think for themselves aren't just the strongest, they're the ones others eventually look up to. Think of one time you felt pressured to follow the crowd. Write down how you felt and whether the decision matched your values. Next time you're in a similar situation, pause and ask yourself, is this the right choice for me? Practice making at least one decision this week based on your values instead of what others are doing. If you've failed a test, gotten rejected, or been told over and over that you're not good enough, at some point, you start believing there's no point in even trying. Why bother if the outcome is always the same? That's not reality. It's a mind trap called learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is when you face so many struggles or failures that you start believing you have no control over your life. Instead of fighting back, you accept defeat before you even try. It's like a caged animal who stops trying to escape, even when the cage door is left open. For young men growing up without a dad, this mindset can be even stronger. Without a father figure to push you, challenge you, or pick you up after a fall, it's easy to think this is just the way things are. You start believing success is for other people, not you. You see other guys with mentors, connections, and guidance, and you assume you're already behind. So why even try? Think about every time you tried something, sports, a new skill, talking to people, you didn't get it right immediately. So now you don't even bother because you assume you'll fail anyway. You might see guys getting better jobs, starting businesses, or becoming leaders, and you assume they have something you don't. But the truth is, they just kept trying. The way out of learned helplessness is simple, but not easy. Reframe failure. Every time you fail, say to yourself, this is proof I'm trying. The only real failure is not trying at all. Take small wins seriously. If you do one push-up today, it's progress. If you study for 10 minutes, it's progress. If you start a conversation with one new person, it's progress. Challenge one limiting belief. Find something you think you can't do and prove yourself wrong by taking one small action toward it. The difference between the guy who succeeds and the one who doesn't isn't talent, connections, or luck. It's the belief that effort pays off. Every strong man you admire was once a guy who refused to quit. Pick one area of your life where you've been telling yourself, I just can't do that. Maybe it's talking to people, getting in shape, or learning a skill. Now take one action to prove that wrong. It can be the smallest step, just one, but take it today. Do you ever think, what's the point? Maybe you want to get in shape, but you tell yourself you'll never look like those guys at the gym. Maybe you wanted to do better in school, but your grades weren't great, so you assumed you'd never be smart enough. Or maybe you thought about taking a risk, asking someone out, applying for a job, but before you even tried, you convinced yourself it wouldn't work out. It's a mind trap called defeatist thinking. Defeatist thinking is when you assume failure is inevitable, so you don't even try. It's a mindset that makes you believe no matter what you do, things won't get better. And the worst part, it's a lie. For young men without a father figure, this mindset can creep in early. If no one ever showed you that effort leads to results, it's easy to believe nothing will ever change. Maybe you've seen people succeed, but it always looked like they had some kind of advantage, money, connections, or natural talent. So you assume, that's not for me. I wasn't set up to win. But here's the truth. No one who ever won in life had it easy. They just refused to let this mindset stop them. Think about someone trying to learn a skill, playing guitar, lifting weights, starting a business. If they don't see immediate results, defeatist thinking kicks in. They tell themselves, I'll never get good at this, and they quit. Now imagine two guys sign up for the same boxing class. One gets punched in the face and thinks, I knew I wasn't cut out for this, and never comes back. The other guy, he gets hit, learns from it, and keeps going. Who do you think ends up winning fights? Who do you think ends up stronger? Not just in boxing, but in life. Breaking out of defeatist thinking isn't about instant success. It's about rewiring your brain. Here's how you do it. Flip the script. Instead of saying, I can't, start saying, I haven't figured it out yet. One word can change your entire mindset. Prove yourself wrong. Pick something you've been avoiding because you think you'll fail, and just try, even if you suck at it. Progress beats perfection every time. Reframe setbacks. Every time something doesn't go your way, remind yourself, it's a lesson, not a loss. The guys who win at life aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who never let failure stop them. You can be the guy who backs down because it feels safer, or you can be the guy who fights for the life he actually wants. The choice is yours. Pick one thing you've told yourself, I can't do. Maybe it's speaking up more, starting a side hustle, or even just doing 10 push-ups. Now do one small action to prove yourself wrong. If you've made it this far, that tells me one thing. You're not the kind of person who just accepts life as it is. You're here because you want better, because you refuse to let your father's absence define you. That's real power. The 25 mind traps we've talked about, they're real and they're sneaky. They'll try to control you. And if you let them, they will hold you back for years. But now you know how to spot them. Most young men stay trapped, blaming, avoiding, doubting. But not you. Your father's absence created gaps, yes, but it also forged unbreakable resilience within you. You are not broken. You are not doomed. You are not a victim. The strongest men aren't those who had it easy. They're the ones who built themselves up despite everything. The past shaped you, but it doesn't own you. These traps tried to convince you that you're powerless, that you're stuck, that you're less than. They lied. So here's your next move. Pick one mind trap that's held you back the most and take one step today that proves you're breaking free from it. Drop it in the comments. Let your community and the world see that you're stepping up, because this isn't just about knowing, it's about doing. There are many more mind traps that we didn't cover in this video, and I will be addressing them in other useful content on my channel every week. So if this video was interesting or helped you and you would like more of it, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will continue to make content that delivers real value. But for now, just remember, your worth isn't measured by his absence, but by your presence in this world. You have everything you need right now to start changing your story. Not tomorrow, not when things are perfect, now.